clairvoyance of being press is limited, and so we rely on press releases. We're going to start with two news stories. They're not press releases, they're two proper news stories that are going to be going on for quite some time, and they are both legal things about law and bollocks. It's going to get complicated pretty quickly. The first one is the Jim Sterling wargaming thing. Before we go into this, there is an element of disclosure. I am going to a wargaming event on Sunday for their grand finals thing. It's a thing to watch the grand finals and things. I've talked about the grand finals before. I have been invited to other wargaming events before, but never really had the time, like at Gamescom or the 100 years of the tank. But with that being said, not affiliated, not partnered, not associated, not nothing. Just been invited to one of the events. So that's basically just a quick bit of disclosure. For basically the quick rundown of the story, because this is quite long, the story basically centers around three aspects. The first is the nature of a free-to-play pay-to-win game, because World of Tanks is a free-to-play game, but you can buy premium items, vehicles, etc., all that sort of thing. So there is the constant battle of free-to-play and pay-to-win. Then there is the Wargaming Partnership Program for the online creators, online influencers, etc. And then there is the nature of copyright takedowns on YouTube and the threatening of copyright takedowns. The first aspect of this story is basically what set this whole thing off, and will probably never have a resolution, because as there is the esports grand final is on Sunday, they released a premium tank, which is you buy it for I think £80 or $80. I think it's $80, and you buy it and it's a premium tank. And a YouTuber, Sorfuck, who is part of the partnership program and part of the sort of community inner circle, probably the best way to describe it, basically criticised the tank for being overpowered, saying that it was a pay-to-win, that you buy it and it is a tank that has very little weaknesses and that whose gun is slightly underpowered, so the premium ammunition that you would use with it would be slightly less effective than it would be for other tanks, which means you have to buy more tank. It's a big money pit. The heat map that was in the video that Sorfuck did certainly showed that it has very, very few weaknesses, and I understood some of the complaints that Sorfuck had, and if true, and if the modelling and all the stuff that he had was true, then that tank is a piece of shit. But as I said, it's part of the free-to-play battle. Games have to be paid for somehow, and so there are going to be microtransactions in it, and so pay-to-win aspects are always going to be a constant battle. The second is the partnership program, Wargaming's partnership program. By the sounds of how this partnership program works, the best example to probably have is the community guidelines and the community sort of restrictions that can happen through YouTube and Twitch. That being that there is no formal agreement to keep to the community guidelines. You can essentially, because even on YouTube you can stick anything you want up, as long as you make it to a specific standard, then you can stick anything up. But the community guidelines are vague purposefully because it gives the company an out. So if there is something that doesn't agree with the company line, they can crack the whip. And that is precisely what happened. Wargaming didn't like the accusation, cracked the whip, kicked them off the partnership program, as they are completely allowed to do. This can look completely and absolutely vindictive, and they are still completely allowed to do it. It is their partnership program, they are allowed to do it. The same way when YouTube cracks the whip, they are allowed to do it. And the third one is where shit gets messy, because that is the use of copyright takedowns, essentially DMCAs. To very much simplify the DMCA is a legal requisite that can be posted to any company that posts or holds data for anything, Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, and it can force a company to take down copyrighted material. Games on YouTube have always been a grey area, because the games, from a legal standpoint, even the gameplay footage, belongs to the company. Because the textures, the programming, the visuals, everything belongs. This is the whole nature of why gaming on YouTube has always been this sort of balancing act between the legal requirements and community requirements and free speech and all sort of things. It's the big balancing act. But there is one specific thing about the DMCA, and that it can only be used for copyright reasons. It can only be used to take down copyrighted content. It is not used for trademarking. It is not used for IP. It is not used to get rid of and use as community management. It is for copyright takedowns only. And essentially, the threat that was made by a rep, not even the community manager, by a representative of the company, then Jim Sterling comes along, reports it, does a video on it, does a Jimquisition on it, as he does, and basically called out Wargaming for its shit, which is rightfully so. But also, to that, Jim made it publicly known that he was going to do the video on it, which left him inundated with community and players and all sorts of things. Some of them hilariously fucking stupid. But he also got a response from Wargaming proper, and the response was basically doubling down. But after the video went up, Wargaming again responded to Jim. Jim put out a tweet putting out as a quote that Wargaming no longer standing by the claims, which leaves the open question of why did you use threat for copyright takedown? Keep the story updated to the moment during the process of editing, right at the time when this video was almost supposed to be going out. World of Tanks has put out a statement, a proper official statement on the World of Tanks website, with part of it being quoted as, "We acted too quickly and over the line when we threatened to have YouTube remove Sir Fox Video through a copyright infringement complaint, and we are apologizing for that." So basically, they are in really full backtracking mode, and this isn't even just backtracking, it's, I wouldn't be surprised if the person who made this threat ends up fired, because this looks horrendous for the company. Part of the section that got cut out in editing to add this bit was me saying that they are in a kind of an isolation mode where the company proper is sort of everyone is slowly separating themselves out away from the person who made the threat, because he's just a rep. He's not community manager and not does anything like that. He is just a sort of a media representative for it, and so everyone seemed to be separating them out from it, and this certainly seems like they're doing just that. I wouldn't be surprised if this rep loses his job. And that's also combined with the 4 signatories of the statement being Thane Linman, the product director of World of Tanks, Marcus Schill, the general manager for Europe, Jay Cohen, the general manager for North America, and Anton Pankov, the publishing director. And that statement from Jim saying the "we don't stand by those claims" is actually part of this, with them saying, while we would obviously not want such content to be associated with any of our games, that referring to the accusation that Sir Fox Video had hate speech and homophobia in it, this video clearly did not. We apologise for the statement, and we don't stand behind those claims. So this is the statement that Jim got that I was talking about just previously. And so with that, I shall return you to the regular scheduled video that was done before this stuff happened, before this update. And on that, we're going to go on to another news story that I found on Gamasutra. I am partly fascinated by this because it's another legal thing, but it shows how IP law can end up being a confusing clusterfuck. This story is about Dota 2 and the rights of Dota 2 and the intellectual property of Dota 2. Part of the reason why this ends up getting complicated is because of Dota's lineage. To go right back to the very, very beginning, the original Dota was created as a mod within Blizzard's Warcraft 3, and then Valve stepped in, basically brought the mod developer on board, and then started development of Dota 2. This is the reason why Dota 2 has 2. It is the sequel to the mod. This then started a big legal battle between Valve and Blizzard. Blizzard saying that as the mod was created within Warcraft 3, with Warcraft 3 materials and with the Warcraft 3 engine and all that sort of stuff, because it was a mod, it belonged to Blizzard. Valve's response to that was, it's a mod, it's created by him, not you. This ended up going to court, but the entire thing was settled out of court, essentially with Blizzard and Valve sharing the rights, in a matter of speaking. To basically simplify the entire thing, everything that was Dota related in regards to the mod belonged to Blizzard, and everything that was Dota related in regard to the development of Dota 2 belonged to Valve. So while the Dota name is essentially shared between the two of them, one owned one section, the other owned the other. Years later, this entire thing becomes a lot more complicated as Lilith Games and uCool started making a game that was based inside the Dota universe. The Dota universe that is itself half owned between Valve and Blizzard. Then there started a legal battle as well, with Blizzard and Valve going, you can't do that, we own it. But uCool's response to that was that Valve doesn't own anything. Valve owns nothing, citing a post that was done by the original mod developer in 2004 when he ended development of the mod for himself, saying that everything related to the mod was now open source, essentially in the public domain. Valve counterclaimed. Obviously, Dota 2 is one of their biggest money makers for the company, and so they turned around saying, no, we own this, trying to make the agreement that was created through Valve and Blizzard secure, saying that Dota 2 is ours, we are allowed to use it, it is not public domain. It's also part of Valve clamping down on people who own the copyright, because essentially everything that is newly created of Dota is done through Valve. Basically everything from the original Dota mod backwards belongs to Blizzard, so a new game developed in the Dota universe is breaching Valve's copyright. This legal battle is still ongoing, and the recent update to this whole story is that the judge Charles Bayer, has denied uCool's motion for summary dismissal, basically getting the thing thrown out of court, basically just getting the whole thing not going to court, and the judge has moved forward with the case going in front of a jury. So this IP case between Valve, Blizzard and uCool is going to court in front of a jury. It's going to court. But the interesting complication to all of this is that very last thing, at the second to last paragraph, as it says here, in a legal document describing that denial, Bayer also brought the question of if Blizzard's original EULA, their user agreement, would have interfered with Uli's, Uli being the original developer of the mod, their ability to pass ownership of Dota to Valve to begin with. That basically meaning that the judge is bringing into question the agreement that Valve and Blizzard had in the beginning. So that agreement between everything Dota 2 belongs to Valve, everything mod created belongs to Blizzard, is now brought into question, with the question being, does Valve own anything? Did the mod developer, in going to Valve to make Dota 2, was he even allowed to do that? So, to really simplify this question, the question ends up becoming, does Dota 2 actually belong to Blizzard? And so, as it summarizes in the very bottom, with these complications in mind, the case is now set to be heard by a jury who will ultimately decide if either of these factors delegitimizes Valve's ownership of the intellectual property, that being Dota, it is accusing uCool of infringing on. So this little lawsuit of Valve against uCool, with uCool developing a Dota universe game, is now bringing the question on whether Valve is even allowed to answer or ask that in a legal perspective, because they don't own it in their view. This entire thing could turn out quite interesting, because, as I said before, Dota 2 is one of Valve's biggest money makers, and this may end up going to Blizzard. Intellectual property law and copyright law and all sorts of things gets very messy very quickly. All you have to do is look at the previous one to see how quickly things can be all kinds of fucked up. Friday's press rush is going to be one of those interesting affairs of being recorded prior. It's going to be recorded probably Thursday, because I am going to be at MCM on Friday. You can catch me there in MCM London at the Excel Centre on Friday. You can see me wandering around. It's going to be just me again. But that also means that the press rush for Friday is going to be pre-recorded. It is going to be recorded in advance, which means that the news that is going to be for it is going to be slightly older. That being, it's not going to be as of the day. A lot of information, like today's one about wargaming, is to the moment. It's to the day. The stuff that's going to be on Friday isn't. Although that isn't the first time I've done that, because I've done that before with some of the other events and things before. So, with that, I will see you on Friday for the next pre-recorded Press Rush.